Has this happened to you recently that you have to give a team member feedback and you don't want to give them the feedback because this thing's been going on for a while and you should have given the feedback before. And now, when you have that conversation, they're going to say, why didn't you tell me this before? Well, the truth is you didn't say it before because you were busy. There was work that had to get done. You didn't want to interrupt that. You were worried they're going to be defensive. All the things that show up when it comes to giving some difficult feedback. But that in and of itself shouldn't be the reason we don't share it. So today on the show, I'm going to talk all about how to kind of quiet that chatter around getting out of giving feedback and not wanting to do it and all the things that come up when we have to give our team members hard feedback. Now, this is not to be confused with the episode from 2 weeks ago talking about confidence and communication and really, why we need to be giving difficult feedback. I talk about feedback on the show all of the time because it is truly one of the hardest skills of being a leader of any kind, whether you're new at it, if you've been doing it for decades, it's always challenging. So feedback is something we always want to be refining our skills about. And less so about the skill of giving it today. I want to talk about the skill of getting out of your head and telling yourself you're not good at it or it's too late or whatever's coming up. All right. I'm Leah Garvin, and this is the New Manager Playbook podcast where I'm on a mission to make managing your team the easiest part of your job. And a big part of that, wouldn't it be a lot easier if feedback was easier? Especially with this story that, I waited too long. I didn't say this thing and now I just got to let it go. The truth is, it is never too late. There are best practices for giving feedback closer to when an event or an incident happens. So if someone is showing up late regularly or is not getting along with employees or is missing parts of their role or dropping the ball, those are things that, yes, you want to be addressing close to when that thing happens. Now, for a number of reasons. You never want your team member to feel like you're watching from the background, coming up with a laundry list of things they did wrong, like you're keeping score and making notes so that you can catch them on something, right? And when we wait and then we go through like, and this and this and this and this, that can obviously trigger defensiveness, right? It's no surprise why. But we also don't want to get into a situation where you give feedback and someone responds with like, that didn't happen, or I don't know what you're talking about, or give an example. And you get uncomfortable, so you get caught off guard and you can't really think of something, but it's a habitual problem, especially like if someone's late a lot or they miss little things about their role and it's hard to pinpoint an example, but it's chronic and it's really affecting the team. Well, you don't want to get in a situation where they're like, no, I didn't. When did that happen? And you're like right? And you're tongue tied. So we want to address things in the moment. But the bigger thing here is what I hear more than the thing happening on the team member's end is that you, as that manager, as that business owner, as that team leader, whatever your role is, you start to tell yourself, well, I can't give this feedback, or it's going to go badly, or I don't know if I can say this, or I can just give part of the message because it's too late. And you start creating all of these reasons that are going to both make that feedback conversation harder to have for you and potentially muddy the message. I think a lot of times when we've gathered a ton of stuff to say, or we haven't given feedback, well, now we think I can't give a list of things like I just said, right? That's never works. So then we just give one. But there was 4 other things that were really problematic that now we have to figure out other feedback moments to be sharing. Now, let's say we give one and we're waiting patiently for the next week to the next one-on-one to give the second, and we're waiting patiently for the next one-on-one to give the next. It can start to feel for that team member, nothing's ever good enough. You always have a new thing wrong with my work and you're picking at me. So this is why we don't want to wait for a bunch of stuff to collect. And because it can create this feeling of like, well, nothing's ever right. Now, I love to play devil's advocate. So what if you have a team member where there are a ton of missteps? Right now, they're new or they're getting settled in or they just changed their role or they took something on, a new project. And yeah, you got a lot of corrective feedback to share. Again, the longer you wait, the more it's going to pile up. And my philosophy is always set expectations up front, talk about it, talk about what you expect to see, what success looks like, what a good job looks like, where you're here to support them, give them space to do it. But then when you see missteps right away, especially if it's detrimental to other team members or your product or your client or your service, whatever you're doing, it's really important to step in early so that things don't get worse. So let's take, for example, a new employee that started and they are in a somewhat leadership position on your team. And you assume that means they're going to be pretty autonomous with their work and be running with things, proposing ideas, being proactive, taking initiative. And you're seeing, okay, at first they're asking a lot of questions. They're looping in team members to help out. Okay, they're learning the ropes. But then you see they never really start to operate independently. And you're thinking to yourself, well, gosh, like it's okay to be onboarding, but like that should be over it eventually. And you're starting to get frustrated. But it's busy and you just don't want to rustle feathers. So you let things go by. Now it's been a few weeks, now it's been a few months, and now other team members are looking to you and they're thinking, well, hey, why didn't we deal with this already? Like, am I supposed to do their job? Why is that person here? So now by waiting, you've created a challenge for that person because they haven't gotten the feedback, and a challenge for the rest of your team members. They're looking at you like, what's happening here? Now, you might think in that moment, oh gosh, I blew it. I let this go on too long. What do I say to my team members? What do I say to that other person? Like, I don't know what to do from here. And that's what this episode is about. That moment when you realize you've got to give feedback. It's probably later than you would have liked to have done it because you do know you're supposed to give it in the, right away. Best judgment is you shouldn't wait, but like whatever, it's time's passed. That is the day we're going to say something. Okay. It is the beginning of the year. There are all sorts of reasons and goal setting and things that you can anchor to so that it doesn't feel to your team like you've pulled something out of thin air and we're waiting to like tell them all the things you didn't like about them, right? This is not the point. And so I encourage you listening. And if you're driving, think about it. If you're sitting at your desk, literally grab a sheet of paper, open up a notes app, open a doc, and write down, what are some of the conversations that I have not had that I need to be having? Is it feedback? Is that you haven't really done performance reviews in a while? Is that your last cycle of performance reviews, you really didn't say all the hard messages that you had to? Is it that you haven't shown appreciation for someone that's doing a great job? And now you're worried they're a flight risk, right? That's another challenge that happens when we wait too long to give feedback, is that someone may feel undervalued. So I want you to literally stop and think, what are any of the conversations that I have not been having that I've now built a new narrative for myself saying, well, too much time has passed, so I can't have that conversation. I can't do that thing. Okay, think about that. And then I encourage you to, let's say before the end of January, okay, this episode is coming out January 13th. If you're listening later, give yourself 2 weeks. By the end of 2 weeks, have that conversation with someone. And the way we approach that conversation is we own it. We own, hey, you know what? I realize that this is something I should have said earlier. I realized this is something that I had noticed earlier. I realized you had asked for feedback and I didn't really have the words to say at the time. Own it. You know how far that's going to go to build trust with your team members? You know how far that's going to go to show your humility as a leader, your self-reflectiveness, that you are also here to grow and do your best, that you don't think you're infallible? Own it, okay? Maybe you say, hey, this wasn't really an issue until this project started, or this person was hired, or we took on this new project, right? Own, that's okay. You don't have to be perfect. Someone doesn't say, why didn't you say this before? Like, we don't need to go there. Own that. It also does a little bit of objection handling, right? So you are saying why you did not bring it up already. That's a very helpful for when you get into the defensive zone. That can happen 8, 9 times out of 10 when you give feedback. You are warding off the hard parts of the conversation. Hey, I was reflecting end of the year, beginning of the year, whatever. I realized as we approach these new goals that we have, these new projects, these new opportunities, this is something that we really want to fine tune so that we can accomplish X, Y, Z. This does not, just the way I'm saying it, I'm thinking pretty critically right now. I'm not feeling like that framing will create as much defensiveness as This is something you need to get better. This is going wrong, right? This is like you're anchoring it into reflection, moving forward, setting up for success, right? You see the language here. It's still feedback. It's still giving someone specifics, right? So we're, again, taking responsibility. We're saying, contextualizing why not before. So, hey, as we're starting the new year, I've reflected on this. I'm realizing this needs to be changing, whatever. And then you make a clear ask. So this person that was supposed to be taking on that more proactive role, and they're leaning on a lot of team members saying, hey, there's a lot going on at the end of the year. It's time to really consider the onboarding part done and you to be owning projects. Here is how I envision that. Now you're setting expectations. Let me know what you think. What questions do you have? Now we're using open-ended questions. We're using our coaching skills. And then we say, here's how I will support you close those gaps with whatever that person responds with, right? If you are saying, hey, I'm owning this. I'm realizing we need to make some shifts here. What do you think? What support do you need? If that is the framing of this hard conversation and your team member starts laying into you with, well, you should have told me this and I didn't know this. It's like they're missing the conversation because you did not accuse them of anything. You did not say, it's my way or the highway. You did not say it's this or else. You're not saying anything that should trigger that. So now you're actually getting so much freaking information about that team member and how they're handling hard conversations. Information that you need to know. Because if people are not able to be open to feedback, if people are not able to learn from their mistakes and have these hard conversations, that is an area to develop along with this thing that's not working, right? That is just as big of a problem as whatever misstep has triggered the need for feedback. How meta is that, right? So we avoid these things often because we think, gosh, I'm kind of wrong too. I didn't give the feedback. I wasn't saying the things that needed to be said. And I appreciate you owning up to that. And you know what? Your team member will appreciate that too. That's why we want to say that. And then the people who will stick with you thick and thin, the people that, especially my business owner listeners, that are going to take you from what got you here to what get you there, right? These people that you are growing and cultivating as you are growing and cultivating your business, expanding, scaling, thinking about new offerings. Those are the people. They've got to be ready to listen to some feedback. That's who you need with you. And if you're in corporate and you have some less control of those levers, these are skills that you are going to have to support your team in building and delivering on. Everybody has to get better at feedback. It is something that is, we're getting worse as a population at feedback. I'm seeing it. And it's not just folks that are younger, although that has been a big challenge, right? As folks entering the workforce, they're less used to having feedback. They may be less used to that confrontation. But I think as a whole, we are hypersensitive to feedback right now. And so when you don't want to have a hard conversation as that leader, you can think, I don't even want to deal with this. So again, I appreciate you taking responsibility that, yeah, you should have had the conversation before, potentially. Now, we have a lot of content on the show about how to have that conversation. And again, I already said, spoiler, you want to have it as close to the incident as possible. And another spoiler, you want to have that conversation one-on-one. So, not sort of like doing that in front of the group unless there was some sort of issue with the group, right? But the truth is, you deciding because you didn't give it before, now you can never give it and you shouldn't give it and we have to save it up and then it causes something later. All of that narrative, this is you growing and building your skills in feedback. It's not too late. We can have the conversation now. We can take responsibility. We can own it. And there's nothing that builds more trust, nothing that builds more buy-in than you as a leader owning up to the mistakes you make. There's nothing that makes your team then own up to their own mistakes better. And again, like I said, if your team members act like middle school girls saying like, well, you said this and I'm not going to do it. Like, look at you. It's like, forget it. That person, that's a whole different issue. And it's lucky that you found that out. And we're not talking about managing out today, but I think I want you to give your team members an opportunity to show that they can handle feedback. I want you to know which of your team members are the ones that are most resilient and ones that need more support in wrestling with their propensity to be defensive. I've got a 6-year-old right now and she's learning how to read. And when she gets her B's and D's and S's all backwards, and I'm like, oh, like, it's just this one's backwards. She starts flipping out like, no, it isn't. It doesn't matter. And I'm like, yikes. Like, we got to help this kid get better at being okay with their mistakes, because she's never going to read if I never say anything and she's got all these backwards letters and nobody corrects her whole life because she's flipping out on them, right? So like, that's my responsibility as her mom. Well, it's your responsibility as their manager to give someone feedback. And then it's that person's responsibility to act on it. So it's like you lead the horse to water and then they drink. So it's not too late to give feedback. Here is to having that conversation. Here is to that list you just made. I'm holding you to it. And writing down who you need to give feedback to and having that conversation by the end of the month and seeing how it goes. If the conversation is very, very charged and you feel like, well, gosh, like, will this make someone want to quit and leave? Like, it's things to think through. Those are not reasons to not have the conversation. But then there's about putting some safeguards in place, right? Having backup plans and figuring out how you want to message this thing that could create such a strong reaction that that's what you're worrying about. But I will say this. A lot of times we worry that when we say something, someone's going to flip out or someone's going to quit, and it's not the response that happens. And a lot of times when we get it right, when we bring the empathy and the specificity and all the tools that we know about giving feedback, and we bring compassion first and foremost and take responsibility, the reaction isn't, well, then F you, I'm out of here. It's just not the case. And like I said, if that is how close your team member is, even when you've used all your skills, all your tools, then that person could leave you in a really tough spot down the line when you really need them. And I don't know if that's worth it. All right. I know that's a pretty hot take I got there, but we've got to give feedback. Folks have to be aware of the things that they're not landing. That's just part of working. All right. And if you need support with this, you know who to call. hello@leahgarvin.com. Here to support, here to help you craft that feedback message, here to help you deliver that, do a feedback workshop with your team, get more familiar with giving and receiving feedback. Hey, you need a feedback tool, I got it for you. See you next time.